Why is it that your dreams burn so brightly in your mind, yet your days slip by in the same dull routine? Have you ever felt the agony of knowing you're meant for more, only to watch your own hesitation tear every plan apart before it even begins? There's a brutal truth hiding beneath the surface of every failed attempt. It's not laziness or lack of discipline that keeps you stuck, but a silent force deep inside that thrives on your doubts, feeds on your fears, and turns your biggest ambitions into quiet surrender. This is the hidden war raging in your mind every time you imagine a different life. A war that convinces you to stay small, to delay, to trade your potential for comfort. You know the cycle. You get inspired. You set grand goals. You swear this time will be different. But something invisible pulls you back, draining your energy, clouding your resolve. It's the part of you that feels safest when you're standing still, that whispers you're not ready, that dangles tomorrow like a promise it will never let you keep. It's the same force Carl Jung tried to expose, the shadow that writes your story from the dark, making you call it fate. And until you see it clearly, you'll keep wondering why your brightest ideas die before they ever leave your mind. Carl Jung called this deeper force the shadow, the hidden side of your mind that quietly holds every old fear you've ever carried, every painful memory you've tried to forget, and every doubt that creeps in when you dare to dream bigger. The shadow isn't something evil lurking in the dark. It's a part of you that believes it's keeping you safe, even as it keeps you stuck. It watches silently whenever you set a new goal, scanning for anything that feels like a threat. Because to the shadow, change, no matter how positive, always comes with the risk of pain or failure. Every fresh ambition, every big idea that pushes you beyond your comfort zone, sounds the alarm inside your mind. It warns, whispers, and works behind the scenes, all to pull you back into what feels familiar and safe. That's why the moment you get serious about your goals, the shadow doesn't wait long to make itself known. You might feel an unexpected wave of exhaustion just as you're about to start. You might find yourself staring at your screen, mind blank, as if your thoughts are stuck in mud. Distractions you've ignored for weeks suddenly seem urgent. The pile of laundry, the clutter on your desk, the endless rabbit hole of researching instead of doing. The bigger your dream, the louder your shadow's resistance grows. It's not subtle, it's relentless. And because it often feels like your own voice, you mistake these signals for laziness or lack of discipline, never realizing they're signs of an internal battle you can't win by pushing harder. But this isn't happening because you're weak or flawed. It's because your mind is trying to protect you from what it sees as danger, even if that danger is only imagined. Your shadow doesn't know the difference between real, physical threats and the emotional discomfort of stepping into the unknown. So it reacts the same way to both, flooding you with hesitation, second-guessing, or a sudden need to escape back into safe routines. Jung showed that until you recognize this hidden conflict for what it is, you'll keep repeating the same frustrating pattern. You'll get excited about a new idea, feel the spark of possibility, and start planning with all the optimism you can muster. Then, just as it's time to act, the shadow strikes. Doubt creeps in. Motivation fades. You hesitate, telling yourself you're just not ready yet. Days pass, momentum stalls, and soon you feel the sting of failure settling in. That sense of disappointment doesn't just hurt. It sends you searching for the next rush of motivation, a new video or book or strategy to reignite your excitement. But every time you skip over the root cause and reach straight for hype, you're giving more power to the shadow. Because motivation alone can't heal what's hidden. In fact, it can even become fuel for the shadow's cycle, each burst of excitement followed by a deeper crash into the old fears you haven't faced. You might think the solution is just to build a stricter routine or summon more willpower, as if forcing yourself into new habits could finally break the cycle. But Jung taught that willpower alone can never overcome what you refuse to face directly. The shadow isn't impressed by your discipline, it simply waits. And each time you try to charge ahead without understanding the fears underneath, it grows a little stronger. It watches quietly, gathering every small stumble and turning them into proof that you'll never change. The shadow whispers doubts in the most convincing voice, saying things like, "See? You can't do it. You always give up. Why bother trying again?" These whispers don't come all at once. They creep in slowly, seeping into your thoughts when you least expect them, making you second-guess every plan you once felt so excited about. What begins with inspiration often feels like it should end with victory. But for so many people, it takes a sharp turn. The initial excitement sparks action, but that action quickly hits an invisible wall of resistance. Resistance breeds hesitation, and hesitation invites guilt. You start to feel ashamed for not following through, frustrated with yourself for slipping back into old patterns. And rather than pausing to ask what truly went wrong, you look for the next secret hack, the next motivational speech, the next productivity system that promises to fix it all. But every time you skip over the real cause of your hesitation, you hand more power to your shadow. Because until you face the part of you that's afraid, no amount of planning or pushing will make the cycle stop. If you look closely at your own life, you might see just how often this pattern has played out. How many times have you felt a rush of determination, convinced this time would be different? How many times have you scribbled down new goals, mapped out detailed steps, or downloaded fresh apps and tools, only to quit days later when the initial spark faded? Each time, it feels like maybe you were missing just one more piece of advice, or waiting for the perfect moment when everything would fall into place. But that perfect moment never comes, because the shadow doesn't need you to fail dramatically. It only needs you to keep planning without ever moving. And the more you plan, the safer you feel, because planning is comfortable. It creates the illusion of progress without forcing you to step into discomfort. Acting, on the other hand, feels dangerous. Taking the first real step means exposing yourself to the possibility of failure or embarrassment, and the shadow will do everything it can to convince you that the risk is too high. It will flood you with doubts, distract you with urgent but unimportant tasks, or exhaust you with mental chatter until you're too tired to start. The shadow's job is simple but powerful: to protect you from pain, no matter the cost. Even if that cost is a lifetime of staying small, repeating old patterns, and convincing yourself that maybe you were never meant to change at all. The real problem isn't that you lack ambition. In fact, it's often the opposite. Your dreams are so big and vivid that they awaken the very fears buried deep inside you. The more you imagine a life beyond what you know, the more your shadow stirs. It worries about the consequences of changing too much, too fast. What if you actually succeed? Will people start expecting more from you than you can handle? Will you suddenly feel pressured to keep performing, to never let yourself rest? And what if you fail in front of everyone who doubted you? What if they're proven right? Even more unsettling, what if you transform so completely that you become someone you don't even recognize? Someone disconnected from the identity you've always clung to. These hidden fears are like fuel for the shadow, feeding its determination to keep you safe in the familiar, even if that safety keeps you small. Every time you catch yourself saying things like, "That's just how I am," or "I always mess things up," you're not just expressing frustration, you're letting your shadow script your future. Jung's words ring true here. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you don't question the voice that tells you who you are, You start living as if your limitations are unchangeable facts, rather than old stories that can be rewritten. And the longer you believe those stories, the more your shadow solidifies its hold, turning your patterns into what feels like destiny. So what can you do about it? The answer isn't to double down on guilt or try to whip yourself into shape with more hype. Those tactics only deepen the shadow's roots. Jung believed the first real step toward change is to look at your shadow directly, without shame or judgment. If you feel stuck in the same loops, no matter how hard you try, pause and ask yourself, what is my resistance protecting me from? Is it fear of being seen and judged? Fear of succeeding and having everything change? Fear of taking on new responsibilities you don't feel ready for? Ask gently. Listen quietly. The answers often drift up from old memories, times when you felt small, embarrassed, criticized, or alone. These moments may seem insignificant at first, but they're often the seeds of the fears that keep you frozen today. Having this honest conversation with yourself is where everything begins. Tonight, give yourself the gift of stillness. Find a quiet place, sit down, and close your eyes. Invite the part of you that always hesitates, always finds an excuse, always pulls back at the last second. Ask it softly, what are you afraid will happen if I actually change? Let whatever comes up spill out, even if it feels silly, angry, or uncomfortable. That voice you hear is your shadow, finally speaking its truth. Remember, your shadow isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to protect you from what it learned to fear long ago. But safety and growth rarely share the same path. At some point, you have to decide if you want to keep avoiding discomfort or finally start living the life you imagine. When you choose to face the shadow with compassion instead of judgment, you open a door to change that no amount of force could ever unlock. Most people believe the only way to break free is to shame themselves into changing. They repeat harsh words in their heads, calling themselves lazy, worthless, or weak whenever they slip. They punish themselves for every mistake, thinking that if they just feel bad enough, they'll finally get it right next time. But Jung knew a painful truth. You can't bully yourself into becoming someone new. Each harsh word only feeds the shadow, adding more fear, more doubt, and more resistance. Self-hate doesn't dissolve old patterns. It locks you deeper inside them. The more you fight yourself with anger, the more exhausted you become, until you're too drained to take even the smallest step forward. It's a trap so many fall into, believing the solution is to be harder on themselves, when what they really need is understanding. Acceptance isn't about giving up on your goals or settling for less. It's about meeting your shadow with honesty and compassion. It's about realizing that every time you've struggled, it wasn't because you were broken or hopeless. It was because a part of you was terrified. When you finally see what that fear is trying to protect, the power it has over you begins to fade. The invisible battles you've been fighting inside your own mind start to quiet down. And in that calm, you find the energy you need to act, not out of desperation or guilt, but from a place of clarity and purpose. Remember, real change doesn't demand grand gestures or overnight transformation. It grows from tiny, honest steps taken again and again. Send that one email you've been avoiding, the one you keep putting off until you feel ready. Read just a single page of that book you bought months ago, the one you know could help you grow. Speak your mind to just one person, even if it makes your voice shake. These small moves may seem insignificant in the moment, but each one teaches your shadow something important: that you can survive discomfort, that you won't collapse if you take a risk, that the world won't end if you step out of the safety of old habits. And every time you take one of these small steps, your shadow loses a little of its grip. You start to build a new kind of momentum, not the fleeting rush that comes from massive bursts of motivation, but the quiet, steady confidence that grows when you prove to yourself that you can keep moving. The key isn't to chase big changes or wait for perfect timing. It's to build a rhythm of small, consistent actions, each one reminding you that you are stronger than your fears and more capable than your doubts would have you believe. As you keep moving forward, don't just focus on ticking tasks off your list. Pay attention to the moments when resistance sneaks in. Notice the quiet thoughts that tell you you're too tired, too busy, or not ready yet. Each evening, take a few minutes to sit with yourself and look back on the day. Ask yourself honestly, did you take the small step you promised yourself you would? Did you follow through on that action, no matter how small it seemed? And if you didn't, what story did your shadow tell you to make you pause or turn back? Writing these reflections down isn't just an exercise in journaling. It's Jung's way of making the unconscious conscious, of shining light on the patterns that usually hide in the dark. Each sentence you write becomes a tiny act of self-liberation, pulling you out of the automatic cycle that's kept you stuck for so long. Because every time you put your resistance into words, you weaken its power over you. What once felt like an invisible force weighing you down starts to look like something you can actually work with. By tracking these patterns, you begin to see the moments when your shadow is loudest, the triggers that send you spiraling, the excuses you return to again and again. And with that awareness, you're no longer a passive participant in your own story. You're someone who notices, learns, and gradually chooses a different response. And remember, you don't have to do any of this alone. It's easy to think you should figure it all out by yourself, but isolation is the shadow's favorite hiding place. Jung knew that sharing your struggles with someone you trust doesn't make you weak, it makes you braver. When you speak your fears out loud, you break the illusion that you're the only one wrestling with these thoughts. Even one conversation can loosen the shadow's grip. Finding a friend, a mentor, or even an online community willing to listen without judgment can turn shame into connection and hesitation into momentum. Because when you feel seen and supported, growth stops feeling like an endless uphill battle and starts becoming something you can actually sustain, one honest step at a time. Expect setbacks along the way, because no real change happens without moments that test your resolve. There will be days when the old fears return louder than ever, when your shadow's voice insists that it's safer to stay exactly where you are. You might feel the familiar pull of procrastination or the sudden heaviness of self-doubt, like all your progress was just a fleeting illusion. When that happens, remind yourself that stumbling doesn't erase the steps you've already taken. Progress is never a straight line. It's a winding path that asks you to keep showing up, even when you feel like you've slipped backwards. Jung's words carry a powerful reminder in these moments. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You are not defined by yesterday's struggles. You're defined by what you do next. Accept the stumble without turning it into a story of failure. Forgive yourself quickly and gently, then take the next small step forward. Because the truth is, growth isn't built on perfection. It's built on your willingness to return to your path again and again. So here's your blueprint, the simple sequence that can transform your relationship with your own mind if you commit to it honestly. Start by identifying your shadow. Pause long enough to ask yourself what your resistance is really trying to protect you from. Listen carefully, without judgment, and let the answer surface, even if it surprises you. Then, choose one small, concrete action you can take each day, a step so manageable that your shadow won't feel threatened by it. Once you've acted, take a moment to track what you did and what resistance you felt. Writing it down helps you see patterns you'd otherwise miss and creates a record of your quiet victories. Next, Don't keep your journey a secret. Share your intentions and struggles with someone you trust, someone who can hold space for your fears without feeding them. Because when you bring your experience into the light of connection, you weaken the shadow's illusion that you're alone. And when you inevitably slip, and you will, remember that slipping isn't the end. Return to your intention without shame, reminding yourself that consistency over time matters far more than flawless execution. Repeat this cycle for 3 weeks, allowing each honest step to chip away at your old patterns. As you do, you'll start to notice something subtle but powerful. The fears that once kept you frozen begin to soften, and your confidence grows. Not from hype or force, but from the quiet strength you build by facing yourself with compassion. Most people will never finish this journey. They'll quit halfway, get distracted, or wait for the perfect moment that never comes. But if you are still watching, you've already proven you want truth more than comfort. Carl Jung believed those who dare to face themselves become rare and powerful. They stop living by old scripts and start writing their own. They learn to meet their shadows with honesty instead of fear, and that changes everything. The world needs more people willing to wake up, face their shadows, and move forward with courage. The world needs you. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to comment the word shadow below. It's a simple way to show you're ready to confront what's been holding you back, and it lets others know they're not alone. Support someone else who shares the word too, and together we can create a space where honesty is celebrated and real change becomes possible. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of this community. Your new story starts now.